Canada does not advertise this side of itself. The maple leaf, the apology, the politeness, that's the brand. But underneath the civility, this country built some of the most haunting institutions on earth. Prisons carved into cliff faces, mental hospitals where patients outnumbered the entire populations of nearby towns, facilities that held people for decades without trial, without charges, without explanation. Some of these places have been converted into hotels, others are overgrown and slowly collapsing, and a few are simply frozen, exactly as their last residents left them, doors still open, records still on file, personal belongings still on shelves. 10 entries. Let's go. Kingston Penitentiary, Ontario. The prison that refused to stop. Kingston Pen opened in 1835, making it one of the oldest prisons in North America. It was built partly by the inmates themselves, which tells you everything you need to know about how the 19th century thought about rehabilitation. At its operational peak, it held over 1,000 inmates and earned a reputation so dark that multiple government inquiries described conditions inside as medieval. There were riots in 1971 that left 2 guards dead and the institution essentially destroyed from within. Officials spent weeks surveying the damage. When Kingston finally closed in 2013, after 178 years of continuous operation, the federal government made an unusual decision. They turned it into a tourist attraction. Today, you can walk the cell blocks, sit inside a solitary confinement unit roughly the size of a parking space, touch the walls of a building where men spent their entire adult lives. Over 100,000 people visit every year. Make of that what you will. Forensic Psychiatric Hospital, Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. Riverview Hospital opened in 1913 on a hill overlooking the Fraser Valley with an ideology that sounds almost utopian in retrospect. Fresh air, farm work, community, and nature would heal the mentally ill better than sedation and restraint. At its peak in the 1950s, over 4,700 patients lived on the grounds, more than many entire BC towns at the time. Then deinstitutionalization swept through Canadian policy, and Riverview began a slow, painful emptying that lasted decades. The buildings were never demolished. Today, the campus is almost entirely intact. Gothic stone buildings, a power plant, a chapel, a farm, all frozen and crumbling simultaneously. Hollywood noticed. Over 100 television shows and films have shot there, including The X-Files, Supernatural, and Deadpool. An abandoned psychiatric hospital so cinematic it became the default backdrop for horror across North America. The irony is that the real history is far stranger than anything filmed there. The Brandon Asylum, Manitoba. The one still hiding in plain sight. The Manitoba Developmental Center in Brandon opened in 1889 under its original name, the Manitoba Home for Incurables, and that name alone should stop you cold. Patients were committed for reasons that included epilepsy, unwed pregnancy, poverty, and vague diagnoses like moral deficiency. The institution sat on over 1,000 acres, operated its own farm, generated its own power, and was entirely self-contained, a city within a city, except nobody inside had chosen to be there. Unlike many institutions, Brandon never fully closed. Parts of it still operate, but the oldest buildings, the Victorian ward blocks with their steep roof lines and long interior corridors, stand empty and deteriorating on the same grounds. Most people driving through Brandon have no idea the campus exists. A functioning care facility and a century-old asylum occupying the same address. Two different eras of what we told ourselves about the vulnerable standing 30 meters apart. Ocala Prison Farm, Burnaby, British Columbia. The farm that was also a death row. From 1912 until 1991, Ocala held what British Columbia sent it: murderers, petty criminals, men awaiting trial, women in a segregated wing, juveniles in another. The gallows inside executed 44 people. The prison farm ran at full agricultural capacity. Inmates worked fields that today are covered by suburban housing. When Ocala was demolished and the land sold for development, activists attempted to preserve at least the gallows structure. They failed. The housing development went up. But here's the detail that haunts people who know this history. The bodies of those 44 executed inmates were buried on the prison grounds in unmarked graves. The housing went up over those graves. A residential suburb in Burnaby sits on a prison cemetery that nobody mentions at the real estate open house. The New Brunswick Provincial Lunatic Asylum, Fredericton. It opened in 1848. It closed in 2015. 167 years of continuous operation as a psychiatric facility, which means it outlasted the institution of slavery in the United States, both world wars, the entire 20th century, and the complete arc of modern psychology as a discipline. The building that stands today, the main Victorian structure, is a registered heritage property. It is also actively deteriorating. What makes this entry different is the archive. When the last patients transferred out, researchers discovered records going back to the founding year. Patient files with handwritten case notes, admission registers listing names, ages, and the stated reasons for committal. The history of what New Brunswick decided was madness, documented across 167 years of evolving and sometimes terrifying standards. The building may or may not survive. The archive is what matters. Hagersville Jail, Ontario. The one that looks like it closed this morning. Hagersville's county jail operated from 1843 to 2001. When it closed, the municipality couldn't decide what to do with it. So they did nothing. For over 2 decades. The result is a building in a state of preservation that most historians would consider improbable. The cells still have their original iron hardware. The warden's logbook from the final day of operation is allegedly still on the desk in the administrative office. Local teenagers know about the building. The town knows about the building. Everyone has been inside except the people authorized to make decisions about it. It stands in the center of a functioning small town, completely intact, completely unused, completely in between what it was and whatever it becomes next. Saskatchewan Hospital, North Battleford. The place that built its own universe. At its 1940s peak, Saskatchewan Hospital held 2,600 patients on a campus so large it had its own railway spur line. It generated its own electricity. Patients ran its bakery and its farms. There was a movie theater, a dance hall, an orchestra, a greenhouse. The institution didn't just house patients, it constituted an entire economy, and that economy ran almost entirely on patient labor with no compensation. After deinstitutionalization, Saskatchewan Hospital contracted dramatically. Today it still operates as a psychiatric facility, but on a fraction of its former scale, and the older buildings, the ones from the 1914 original construction, stand empty on the same grounds, their windows darkened, their wards silent. The dance hall still exists. Nobody dances. The Alberta Hospital, Ponoka. The files they almost destroyed. When Alberta Hospital Ponoka was established in 1911, it received patients from across the province with a broad mandate and almost no oversight. What makes this entry specific and disturbing is what almost happened in 1995. During a renovation, workers discovered a storage room containing approximately 100,000 historical patient files, some dating back to the hospital's founding year. Handwritten case notes, admission records, family correspondence, photographs, the files were nearly incinerated as waste. A last-minute intervention by archivists halted the destruction. The records were preserved. They now constitute one of the most significant and most troubling archives of institutional psychiatric history in Canada. They document who got committed, who signed the paperwork, and what it took to get out. Often the answer to that last question was nothing. There was no mechanism. You were simply in until someone decided otherwise. The Penetanguishene Mental Health Centre, Ontario. The experiment. In 1965, a group of psychiatrists at the Oak Ridge Division of the Penetanguishene facility launched what they called the Social Therapy Unit, a treatment program for the criminally insane that has since been described by scholars as one of the most ethically catastrophic experiments in Canadian medical history. Patients were placed in group therapy sessions lasting up to 80 hours. Forced to confront one another psychologically without stopping. Some were administered hallucinogens, some lost the ability to distinguish the experiment from reality. The Asylum for the Insane, London, Ontario, the one that became the city. The London Psychiatric Hospital, originally the Asylum for the Insane, opened in 1870 on 400 acres of farmland west of the city of London, Ontario. Over the following century, the city grew outward and eventually surrounded it. By the time the hospital began closing its older wards in the 1990s, the Victorian buildings, designed by Kivas Tully in the Italianate style, red brick and copper roof lines, sat in the middle of a functioning urban neighborhood. The main towers are still standing. They have been empty for over 30 years. Canada built these places with full civic sincerity, not in secret, not in shame, publicly, funded, legislated, inspected, awarded. The discomfort isn't that they existed. The discomfort is how recently they did, and how little distance we've actually put between ourselves and them. If you've been inside any of these, tell us in the comments, and if there's one we missed, drop it below.